In this video, I'll be showing you my recipe for an artisan-style sourdough loaf of bread that you can make in a stand mixer. Also, I'll show you a unique way to proof, score, and bake this loaf of bread that'll really simplify the process. To the kitchen. To feed your starter the night before you're ready to bake, take 25 grams of sourdough starter from the fridge and feed that 50 grams of room temperature water. 52 is fine. Stir that all together so the starter dissolves into the water. And then add in 50 grams of bread flour. I overshot and got 54, but you're basically looking for the same amount of flour as water. This will give you enough for 100 grams of starter to use the next day, and you'll have a little bit left over. So I'm going to let this sit out on my counter overnight for about 8 hours at room temperature. If you have a healthy starter like mine, it should double in size overnight and be ready to use. I'm using a KitchenAid stand mixer, but any stand mixer should work as long as you have a bread hook attachment like I have. For the full recipe that I go through in this video, check out the video description. It's 275 grams of water, or 1 1/4 cups, 10 grams of kosher salt, or 1 1/2 teaspoons, 100 grams of active sourdough starter, which is about 1/3 of a cup, but it's really better to measure this with a scale if you can. Then 450 grams of bread flour. I'm using King Arthur brand. If you're measuring in cups, this is about 4 cups of flour minus a few tablespoons. Once all the ingredients are in the bowl, go ahead and set the stand mixer to the lowest setting and start mixing until all of the ingredients incorporate together. Eventually the water will hydrate the flour and you'll get a dough that looks something like this. Now that you've got a dough, go ahead and increase the speed of the stand mixer up to the second speed and continue kneading for about 8 minutes until the dough is fully kneaded. If you want to, you can stop in the middle and make sure that you scrape down the sides of the bowl. I don't like to leave any man behind, so I like to stop at least once and scrape off the sides and incorporate that back into the dough, and then continue kneading. After 8 minutes of kneading, my dough looked pretty well developed. It looked something like this on the hook. Pretty stretchy and elastic, and it would probably pass the window pane test. But I'm keeping this easy today, so I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to let the dough rise right here in this bowl. So I'm going to scrape down the sides of the dough, scraping it off of the bowl until the dough just forms a nice tight ball. Once your dough looks like this, go ahead and cover it up with a plate or some plastic wrap and let it rise on the counter at room temperature for between 5 to 8 hours until it doubles in size like this. This is my dough just after 6 hours. It's doubled in size and ready to shape before its final proof. To keep things easy, I'm just going to shape up this dough once. So sprinkle some flour on your counter and tilt out the dough right onto that floured surface. So now you should have one side of the dough that's floury and the other side of the dough on top is sticky. That sticky side up is going to help the dough stick to itself during shaping, which is what you want. So fold each corner of the dough. Just imagine there are 4 corners. So fold the east side, west side, then the north side, and the south side up and over to the middle until your dough looks kind of like this. So now you've got kind of a log shape, and you'll be able to form that into a round ball in just a second. Gonna scrape, 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 get rid of that flour, and then using my hands, I'm gonna gently round this out into a ball or a circular shape, and then I'm gonna start cupping and pulling the dough like this to create some surface tension across the top of the dough. I'm just cupping and pulling and cupping and pulling the dough, and that's what creates surface tension on the top, which is gonna help the dough keep its shape. Now to keep things super easy today, I'm not actually going to be letting this proof in a Banneton basket like I would usually do, but I'm going to let this proof inside of my Dutch oven. You can of course use a Banneton basket if you want to, that's completely up to you. I just transferred my dough onto the middle of some parchment paper, and then I'm going to transfer that parchment paper with the dough right into the center of my cold Dutch oven. The Dutch oven won't provide any shape to the loaf, it'll kind of have to hold the shape on its own. But it will act as a nice draft-free location for the dough to rise, and the bonus is that I can let the dough proof in the Dutch oven, and then I can bake it in the Dutch oven, so it's a 2-for-1. So if you're following along, cover up your dough and let it rise in the Dutch oven for about 3 hours until it's doubled in size like this. The dough did spread out a little bit, kind of pancakey, but it's puffy and it's ready to be baked. You can score this dough with a razor blade, but I'm going to transfer the dough out onto the counter, sprinkle the top with a little bit of bread flour, and I'm going to score it with my bread knife, my serrated bread knife. This is a really easy way just to score an X on top of your loaf if you don't have a bread lom. So I'm just going to make 2 perpendicular cuts on top with the knife. If you do this, be careful not to let the blade drag through the dough, but just do quick, confident slashes right through the top of the dough in an X pattern. Then transfer the dough, parchment paper, and all into the Dutch oven. Pop the lid back on and move this into your oven. The last trick I'm doing to simplify the process is moving my dough into a non-preheated oven. I'm actually just putting it into the cold oven, setting the oven to 500 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I'm gonna let it bake for 50 minutes at 500 degrees Fahrenheit with the lid on. At the end of 50 minutes, I'll remove the lid, which will release the steam that was inside the Dutch oven, and then I'm gonna continue baking this for another 5 minutes at 500 degrees with the lid off. That'll give us a nice darker brown color on this loaf of bread, and it should be done in 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, the loaf looks like this, nice and golden brown. I'm gonna transfer this to a wire rack where I'm gonna let it cool for about an hour before I slice into it. At that point, we'll see what it looks like on the inside, and I'll see how it tastes on the inside. Now that the bread has cooled, I wanted to give you a side shot. Here's what it looks like on the top and then on the side. I think the scoring pattern and some of the blistering on the sides give the bread quite a rustic look, but the bread is definitely shorter, a little more squat than my usual loaf. If you want a taller loaf of bread, I definitely say to use a Banneton basket instead of letting the dough proof inside the Dutch oven. So the super easy sourdough bread ends up with a nice tight crumb on the inside like this, perfect for making some toast or slathering some butter or jam on top of your slice of bread. If you are looking for a more open crumb sourdough, I suggest following the link that I'm going to put in the description. I've got another video for that type of bread. Here on the Grant Bakes YouTube channel, I want to help you make better bread, sourdough, and pizza at home. So if that's your thing, go ahead and click subscribe and check out some of the other sourdough videos I have for you right here.